Hey guys, welcome to today's tutorial section. So in today's tutorial we're going to be learning how to draft a basic short trouser. Keep in mind that this trouser we're drafting is not going to have an elastic in the waistline. It's a fitted trouser, and then we are going to be cutting it together with a band. We're not going to be separating the band, right? So these are the basic measurements we are going to need: the hip, the crotch, the thigh, the length of the trouser, the waist, and then the circumference of our knee. So we're going to go ahead now to locate our hip. So the hip can be on 8 or 9 depending on the person you are sewing for actually. And then the crotch is on 11 for this person. Then the length of the trouser is 20 inches, and I'll go ahead to add 1.5 inches as my seam allowance. So after doing this, I'm going to go ahead and extend these lines with a ruler. So after extending this line, we're going to go ahead now and label these lines. This is my hip, this is the crotch, then this is the length of the trouser we are working with. Like I said, then this is the hem for the trouser. Then the starting point of our paper will be the waist. So this is a female trouser. We don't want it to just be straight. We want to give it some shape. So on the waist, we're going to go in by 1. Then on the length, that is on the hemline, we're going to go in as well by 1.5. Then we're going to use a ruler to connect from the 1 inches to our hip, then from the hip to the 1.5 on the hem. Again, I will say that again. From the 1 inches on our waist, we're going to connect to the hip. Thereafter, we'll connect from the hip to the hem, to the 1.5 on our hem, like so. Now this is to give the trouser a shape. We don't just want it to be straight on the hip line and the waistline, so we want to give it some shape. Right now we'll go ahead to smoothing in the curve so you won't have any sharp edges. Right, now we'll go in with our waist measurement. So the waist we're working with here is 30 inches. So dividing 30 inches by 4, we're going to have 7.5. So we'll go ahead now and measure our 7.5 and then add 1.5 as our seam allowance. Now on the hip line, we're going to take our hip measurement. So the hip we're working with is 38 divided by 4, which will give us 9.5. So we'll go ahead and mark 9.5 and then add 1.5 inches allowance to this. Then on the crotch line, we're going to be using our thigh measurement, which is 23. So we're going to be dividing our crotch by 2. We're going to be dividing our crotch by 2. So our crotch divided by 2 is 11.5. Then we go ahead again to add 1.5 inches to this. Now keep in mind that if you add too much allowance to your crotch, your trouser can become bulky in front. Now we're going to go ahead and connect these lines together. Then use our curve to curve the other part to our crotch line in order to give it that shape. Right. So now we're going to go to our knee line now. So in the knee, we are working with a knee of 18 inches. So we're going to divide our knee as well by 2. So 18 divided by 2, that is 9. We're going to measure our 9. And then we're going to also add 1.5 allowance to this. Then we'll go ahead to connect these lines together from the crotch to the knee line slantly. So After we're done with this, we're going to go ahead now and input our dart. So for our dart, we're going to be using our nipple to nipple plus half inches for the dart measurement. So our nipple to nipple is 8 inches. So 8 inches divided by 2 is 4. So we're going to be marking 4. Then we're going to go ahead and add half inches to this. Now also the length of this dart will be 4 inches. So we're going to go ahead again and mark that 4 inches. Then we'll connect it with a ruler. Now on the waistline, we're going to be going in on one side and out on the other side by half an inch each. Then we'll slant it to our dart line. Right, so this is basically all for the front piece. We've added some allowance to this, although we need more allowance because we've not added allowance for the dart that we took from this. We just added same allowance. So we're going to go ahead and add that later on. But let's continue now with this pattern. So on the waistline, we're going to be going down by half an inch on the crotch part. Then we're going to use our French curve to smoothen this out. From the half an inch, we're going to connect it to the edge of the other part. Right, so this is to give the trouser a nice shape in front. Now we'll go ahead now and cut this out. Right, so I've gone ahead to cut another piece of pattern paper which we'll be using to draft our back. So I added some allowance from the top of this because I'm going to need them about 3 inches or so at the top of this pattern paper. We're going to need them for our back drafting. Then from the half inches we went down from our crotch line, we're going to measure 2 inches from that half inch. We're going to go up by 2. Then we're going to slant it to the other part where I wrote the waist. We're going to slant it into it. This is to give the back a more nice shape because of the butt that we have at the back, so that it can accommodate the butt, especially people that have bigger butt. Doing this now, when we put on the trouser and we sit, we still have enough space to cover the butt at the back. Then on that same line, we're going to be going out by 2 inches. Then we'll go ahead again to use our ruler to connect it together. So after we are done with this, we're going to go out by 2 inches. On the hip as well, 2 inches, and on the crotch, we're going to go out by 2 inches. Then we're going to use a ruler to connect this first before using our curve to draw out that curve. Just like we did for the front. Now we'll use our curve to blend it in. Right, so also on the knee part, we're going to be going out also by 1.5 inches. Then we'll use our ruler now to connect this together. Also, we'll blend it without the length we are also working with. So we've gone ahead now to add our allowance to the back piece. Now we're going to be working on the dart as well because the back pattern we also have a dart. So I've extended the dart line up, and also for this as well, on the waistline we're going to be going in and out by half an inch each on each side. Then we'll connect it with the same length of our dart, which is 4 inches. Now let's go ahead to cut this out first. And when we are cutting this, we want to get an object to hold this together, because if not, you'll find out the pattern will keep moving and shifting. Now after we are done cutting this, we're going to work on our dart like I said earlier. The dart lines have been extended up, so we're just going to go half an inch on each side, then connect this to form our dart line. Right, so we're going to take this out now and work on our dart. We extend it by 4 inches like we did for the front. Then we'll connect it together and use half an inch on each side. Right, and this is basically it for the front, for the back piece rather. So we've gotten our dart, the shape, then we have the allowance we need for the back piece. Now I'm going to go ahead now to use this pattern paper now, the front pattern paper, to draft the pocket part. So this front part is going to have a pocket. Do not make the mistake of cutting the pocket on the back side. So we're going to be using 3 inches on the waistline, then we're going to be extending the bottom part by 5 inches. This is for the pocket. The trouser is going to have a pocket. So but if you don't want yours to have a pocket, you can go ahead and skip this process. Right, so I'll go ahead now to cut this out.
So I'll go ahead to add 1 inch allowance, which will serve as my dart allowance, which we did not add by drafting this pattern. It is still better to add it now since we are not cutting on the fabric yet. So we'll go ahead to do that, and then we'll slant it to our crotch. Now then I'll go ahead and use this pattern paper to cut out my main fabric. So this is what it looks like after we've cut it out on our fabric. If this video was helpful, please subscribe to our channel and then don't forget to like and comment. We'll see you in our next one.